Hey guys, it's Nature Nate. Before we start the episode, just wanted to say I hope you're all well, hope you're safe. We wanted to share a little bit more about our sponsor who's trying to help the world right now with their work. This pandemic has affected everyone. To get through this, we all need to work together. Cypress River Advisors, with their deep cross-border sourcing and manufacturing knowledge, are providing PPEs for free to medical professionals and communities in need. They're providing protective equipment in New York, California, Michigan, and Japan. They're also providing data visualizations to help make policymakers and the public understand the real impacts of the pandemic. For more information, go to cypressriveradvisors.com/COVID-19. All right, now on to the episode. What time is it? 3 a.m. or 3 p.m.? You can't tell because it's always dark out. You pull yourself together. The hot shower suddenly stops. The cold air stings your skin. As you get on the public bus, the driver doesn't look, just lets out a grunt as you fumble with your bus pass. Or actually, maybe you work from home now. But just come on, just bear with me. A light gray haze washes over the city. You step into your office, sit down, and wince at the fluorescent lights above your head. You hear chirping and look around only to see walls, tinted windows, and shades drawn down. This is your standard life, a dark office. Nature and its surroundings are walled off and blocked out. Despite having the technology to make murder drones and go into space, we haven't really figured out a good way to let natural light in. But what if there was an alternative? What if windows could respond to changes in light throughout the day and automatically adjust to let in the perfect amount of illumination? What if they were designed in such a way that you could see trees and birds in the sky? What if you didn't have to look into the dark mirror every time you want to be reminded of the outside world? Well, such a company exists. In this episode, we talk with Piers MacNaughton from View. That's right, the name of the company is View, because windows, get it? Like you view stuff? And they make smart windows.
So much of our health that we've thought about up to this point has been thinking about our genetics or about our behaviors, but we shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us. And that's, I think, a vision that I'd like to see come true, where these spaces where we spend all of our time make us healthier and more prosperous.
Something that I thought was really important about smart windows and green buildings is that they have the capacity to save energy. During the day, sunlight is going to be contributing to indoor temperature. So if you have a way to regulate automatically the amount of sunlight that's coming in, you're going to be regulating the temperature automatically, and that's going to reduce your air conditioning bills. When I brought this up with Piers, he said that in the beginning it was something they emphasized, but later on they found that actually having natural light inside of the office was improving people's productivity and improving their happiness. And I think that this just draws the comparison between green building, good design, and your own personal happiness. It's not just energy savings, it's also having a non-depressing workplace. Anyway, we talk about smart windows, what that even is, indoor health, and how your office might be slowly killing you. But I guess since you probably work from home now, your home office is slowly killing you. And we're going to talk about that. Hi, I'm Nature Nate, and this is Waste Not, Why Not, a sustainability science show on how not to save the environment. I'm an environmental researcher based in Taiwan, working on energy, ocean, and waste issues. So, hi Piers, how's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, happy to. How would you describe what you do, or maybe what you did, or what you're passionate about at a cocktail party?
Hi, I'm Piers MacNaughton. I'm the Director of Health Strategy at View and a Research Associate at the Harvard School of Public Health. Initially, my interest when I went to college was definitely around the environment, but I was in the more liberal arts side of the program, and I ended up transferring after my first semester over to engineering. And so
you went from liberal arts to engineering.
Yeah, I was lost. My first semester, I took 4 classes that were completely different from each other. None of them fit. And I was like, I'm in the wrong place. And 2 of my brothers do engineering, and all my sisters are in healthcare. So It's an interesting fusion where I feel like I've ended up kind of in the middle, where I'm an engineer by training, but now I've moved over to public health.
Okay. And how did you get started in public health after being interested in engineering?
I was actually, even in my last year, I was looking at master's programs, and I was looking primarily at engineering programs. And, the engineering piece is really important, but ultimately the point of that engineering is to impact people's lives and their health and well-being. that will drive all the solutions we're thinking about in engineering forward.
Okay. So you're at the School of Public Health. You come to this lab. What do you start working on?
So my main focus was looking at how common pollutants that we're exposed to impact our cognitive function.
Okay.
Things like carbon dioxide, which is something that we all exhaust, common pollutants that we experience every day in our lives, things that emit off of the products you have in your home. We call these VOCs, volatile organic compounds.
Okay.
How those impact our performance in the workplace.
So if you're in your office and you feel really tired at the end of the day and you feel like you just can't think anymore, it might not have been because your office day was just so crazy. It might be because your office is kind of like slowly poisoning you a little bit, right? I mean,
it's having a direct impact on our brain function, and it's changing how we can think. In the case of CO2, going from 500 ppm, which is kind of a very low level indoors, to 1500, which is still what you would experience in a conference room or a busy open floor plan, that people's test scores went down by 50%. So these are pretty dramatic changes in cognitive function based on these kind of representative spaces that we're often in.
Are there spaces where you wouldn't have this happen? I mean, or I guess maybe rather, what spaces are more likely to cause this kind of cognitive decline, and how can I avoid these spaces?
I mean, on the CO2 side, it's something that we as humans are exhausting all the time. So it's a matter of not being in overcrowded places.
Just don't be where there's too many people breathing.
Right.
Okay.
And then the flip side is the building has a role to play. If you're not adequately ventilating the space, you're not going to bring in fresh air that pushes that high CO2 out. So it's more about the building side, and ventilation is something that solves a lot of the problems that we have. It reduces CO2. It reduces other air pollutants like VOCs. That's assuming that what it's bringing in is healthy. So the outdoor air has to be somewhat clean, or it has to be cleaned in some way as it enters the building. So it has to be good ventilation or some air cleaning that happens to that air as it comes in.
Okay, so it's a design challenge for the specific building, ventilation, breathing, and then it's also a design challenge for the wider society of just having cleaner air in general. And then it sounds like if your air is clean outside, you could, you'd probably benefit from also going outside. It sounds like being in nature, being outside of your office, being outside of this place where we spend 90% of our time.
Exactly.
Is going to help you think better.
Yeah. And that's not just because of the air you're breathing indoors. There's also all the benefits of taking a break, being exposed to nature. There's this whole concept of biophilic design, which is the concept of bringing life indoors. So having natural plants, views of nature like these ones behind me of the beautiful green hills.
There are beautiful green hills behind and beautiful flowers. I feel very inspired having this conversation.
Exactly. And there's been a lot of research that's shown, and even by our team, that has looked at how having that type of environment promotes creativity, promotes cognitive function. And so it's not just a nice to have, it's actually something that can help stimulate people to perform better.
Okay. So have you been to Taiwan? How do you feel about the buildings in Taiwan? Do they just kind of because I feel like when I go into a building in Taiwan, not every time, but frequently, you see mold, there's a lot of dampness. Taiwan's a very humid place.
There's good and bad. One thing is when you have these older buildings that are very leaky, and actually in Taiwan, most of the buildings are what we call naturally ventilated, which means they don't necessarily have a ventilation system. They just rely on air coming through passively.
Right, just like concrete blocks stacked up. Yeah.
Which is often good because those buildings tend to have a lot more air exchange. So more fresh air is coming through. The challenge is that in Taiwan's case is that outdoor air pollution is pretty high there.
Yeah.
So that air that is circulating through has high levels of particulates. So there is maybe an increase in particulate exposure that comes from that outdoor air coming in, but that's offsetting maybe those interior sources, things like the cooking sources or the off-gassing of products. Those chemicals can be rapidly diffused from the building because the air is coming through.
Interesting. So there is like a geographic, there's a cultural, there's an architectural component that goes into all of this. And so, have you seen any other kind of variations between countries? Is there a country with like particularly good buildings that you're aware of? We said the US wasn't that great.
It all comes down to design practices. Okay. For example, in Europe, they have a different approach to chemical regulation.
The precautionary principle.
Exactly. So it's more precautionary. They have to do a baseline screening. And so they have much fewer of those products that could potentially be harmful. But then, to be fair to the United States, we also have very well-designed buildings from a structural standpoint and from a mechanical standpoint. So we tend to have good ventilation systems, good thermal control. We take for granted here that you're going to have thermal conditions that are between 70 and 74 degrees Fahrenheit. You go to Taiwan and you'll have the buildings range from 60 degrees up to 80 degrees. And same with other like Singapore or other tropical areas. There's very different conditions.
Okay.
And so just to summarize, you were working at Harvard, you were researching public health, you were looking at the cognitive impacts of indoor air quality. What happened next? What are you doing now?
As I was finishing up my PhD, I thought that I should at least have some experience out in the private sector seeing how to put these public health solutions into practice. I had a lot of limitations on what I was looking for. At Harvard, we had developed all this research that shows the things that you can do to make your environment healthier. And the question for me was, how can I actually make a difference? And so I was looking for a company that actually influences real buildings, a space where we can have people that are feeling their best, performing their best, and really enjoying where they are, whether it's where they're working or whether it's a hospital where they are as a patient or a passenger going through an airport or someone's home. And View is a company where we have projects of all these different types, and we're always moving the needle towards the better.
And what is View? And why should we be interested in what View's doing?
So View is a company that makes smart windows, and essentially the way it works is they make a traditional window that can be charged, and when it's charged, it changes the tint state of the glass. And so what it does is it replaces the need for blinds. The glass itself will become darker to prevent glare, and then when there isn't glare and isn't sun on the facade, it'll open up to bring in views. And then what my job is to show how it's not just energy, but also that their health benefit when they're behind view glass.
All right, we're going to take a quick break as advised by Piers, so you can get some fresh air. If you're already outside, maybe breathe deeply if your air quality is not too bad. We already talked about air quality, public health, and how bad air quality can make you a little bit dumber, which is why I said earlier. I didn't sigh too much. Let's go.
But also there are a lot of ones that are just pronounced weirdly, like San Rafael, where it looks like San Rafael, but it's actually different.
Now we're inside View Inc.'s R&D production line, and we're going to see where these windows are actually designed.
Okay, we're at View Inc. in Milpitas, California, and I'm standing here with Piers, and we're looking at looks like maybe a TV factory if I didn't know what I was looking at exactly. Could you tell us what we're looking at here?
So this was originally a Seagate chip manufacturing line, and the process that we use is actually almost the same as the chip manufacturers. And so we're able to reclaim a lot of that same equipment and use it for our first set of glass.
Upcycling, I really like that.
Mm-hmm. The way that it works is we kind of are ionizing that lithium and depositing it onto a pane of glass. When we run a current through that, that's what causes it to change the tints.
Okay, cool. That sounds kind of like how an octopus's skin works, right? Like moving little inks and electrical impulses. I don't know if that helps people. Maybe that's just a Nate thing. Okay, and how many people are working on here at any given time? I see a guy walking through some safety equipment.
In Milpitas, we have around 250 people. Okay. And then we have 500 people working in the factory and another 200 people or so that are out in the field as sales, service.
Wow, okay. So this is pretty big.
Yeah, so it's
a pretty
grown,
big operation.
It's probably doubled our headcount in the last couple of years.
Okay.
So that one there, we call it an IGU, an insulated glass unit. What it really is it's two panes of glass. On one pane, we put the lithium layer, and then we squeeze it in between another pane. So we get a sandwich of glass that's encapsulating that pane. Then lastly, what we do is we put the wiring in so you can run a current through it. That's what causes it to tint.
And why would you want to make a glass sandwich?
Mainly because we have to protect that layer so it doesn't get interfered with.
Okay. I thought it was like sound insulation or something.
No,
like
if moisture gets in there or something like that, it can interfere with and the layer, it's only 4 microns thick. It's a really thin layer. It's a couple of molecules of lithium.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. The purpose of the glass itself is to control the amount of sunlight that's coming in. So functionally, we're trying to reduce glare while at the same time reducing solar heat gain while still keeping the view. So if you think about a traditional building, when you have blinds, you're basically taking away the benefit of having the window, right? You can't see out it. You don't get the daylight. What's the point? So we allow us to have both the view as well as mitigating glare at the same time.
And you save money on blinds.
That's true. If you want, I can show you some of the glass itself and you can see us side by side. Walk and talk.
We're walking, moving through. Looks like a standard sort of facility. High ceilings, which is nice. Just past a fitness room. Seems well equipped.
The fitness room is new, so that's a added perk. Everything from here on over is brand new.
If you're a fan of cable management, then this is what you'd want to see. There's just, a jungle of different wires connecting into little black boxes, big white boxes, white rectangles. It's kind of beautiful in a special way.
On this side, this is where we test all of the electrical components. So every single pane of glass has its own IP address and is individually controllable. See those white boxes there? Those are control panels. They're what are regulating the current that goes to the glass. And then we can monitor remotely to make sure it's working properly.
That's good. There's some blue windows in front of us.
Right, so I'll just walk you down this wall so you can see a couple different sizes / tint states. You can see here, this being the darkest tint state, and on the far end you'll see some of the clear ones.
The darkest state kind of looks like the top of the tint on your car. Maybe the old cars had like the blue tint on top. It kind of looks like that. And then is this completely black, or is there something in front of it?
No, you can still kind of see through.
Oh yeah, you can almost see through. Wild.
We're testing out some of our lower thresholds.
Yeah, I would just assume there's like a sign in front of it or something. I wouldn't realize you can look through it if you get close enough.
Right, and then up top you can see this is where the control hardware is. So each different one of these panes has its own little white box that comes down. The way the wiring works is that we have a single line that goes the length of the building, and then dropping off that line are the connectors that go to each pane of glass. And we actually pre-cut those wires, and they have all the ending already in place. So for the person installing it, it's just plug and play.
So this is something you could do in your home. Is this something you set up yourself, or would you need View to come and set it up in your home?
So View would be the ones kind of doing the installation. Typically what we do is we work with glaziers, who are the industry that installs glass. We train them in how to install it. So they do basically the same thing they typically do. They have one more step, which is just plugging in the pane.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Smart. I wouldn't know how to install my own windows anyway. So.
Right. So you can walk down here and I'll show you some of the different, you guys might be interested in is the bird friendly. So just having a pattern on the outside to prevent birds from flying into it. And
oh, really? Oh, so they can see that, there's something here. I'm
right,
not just
and
going
they change their trajectory.
Because buildings kill a lot of birds.
It's true, and especially...
Or birds kill themselves on buildings, maybe.
Right. And there's also, in certain verticals, like aviation, for example.
So you could like put that on a plane, or?
No, it'd just be at the airport. We have a lot of airports that
control
install this.
Towers.
Exactly,
right.
Yeah.
Got it. And then this one has lines going across. Is that the same kind of bird defense?
Yeah, it's just two different patterns depending on your preference.
Did the birds have a preference?
Either one will keep them away.
Okay.
Your pick. I'll go down to this last wall. This is actually two different generations. If you look side by side, it's kind of hard because it's not sunny out. But this one on the left has more of a blue tint as it gets darker. This one on the right is more neutral. This is what we call our G4 smart glass, which we are just releasing. It just gives people the choice to either have, as it gets darker, they want to have more of a blue tint or more of a neutral gray tint.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the tinting in like the Matrix. You know, Matrix Reloaded, everything's like a little bit of that one color. You know,
right.
And with the gray, it looks more normal, maybe like a cloudy day kind of gray. And then the blue is definitely, I feel like there's a tinting you can see.
Yeah, in the industry they call it color rendering, which is how much does it maintain the original color of, through the pane of glass.
Interesting. So are these like transition lenses sort of, where throughout the day they'll get stronger or weaker based on the sunlight outside?
The way it works is these people behind us, they actually model all the buildings in 3 dimensions, and they map out all the different sun conditions based on time of day.
Wow.
And the solar trajectory, and they base the tinting schedule off of that. So it's all physics-based.
Wow. Okay, that's more complicated than I thought.
Right.
But maybe that's easier.
The main thing is that's not reactive. So we're not saying that when we perceive the sun being on the facade, we start tinting. It's knowing when the sun's going to be there.
So
that's
you can
when
do
it tints.
in advance of the sun, and it can be more efficient, it sounds like.
Plus, if the sun's coming in and it's penetrating just till 2 feet in and not interfering with the occupants, there's no reason to tint. You only want to tint it if it's going to be having direct glare on the occupant itself.
Wow, that's a lot more sophisticated than I thought at first.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And it can be relatively simple for windows on the side, but when you think about skylights or other applications, then the geometry gets kind of complicated in terms of how it impacts.
It sounded complicated already.
All right.
Cool.
So we actually do all of that up front with our customers. Even before they purchase the product, we do a full analysis of when would there be glare with blinds versus with view glass, and what would be the energy benefits. We kind of do a full modeling analysis in advance.
Oh, okay.
Based on their design.
So each specific building. So you don't.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere that's really hard to do it? Is there any place with like crazy sunlight or clouds or like rapid weather changes or something?
I think there are 2 complications. One is definitely in like urban cores, there's lots of reflections off of buildings. So you have to actually model those buildings and the reflectivity of the sun off of the facade.
Like that magnifying glass, like super sunbeam coming in.
The second is in like very northern or southern areas. Like we have a building in Anchorage where, in the summer, the sun's like along the horizon the whole day. And so they have to kind of make a custom solution for that.
Interesting. So for most people, if you're kind of in the middle latitudes, it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But even if you're in Alaska, you can get a special window just for you.
So we can loop around back here.
Let's go. Let's loop.
Okay, Piers, take us back to the meeting room. Now that we know how the windows are made, let's find out a bit more about the benefits behind using smart windows. Waste Not, Why Not talks to the people who know what's really happening with the environment. The show is scientifically proven to give our listeners the tools, the arguments, and the laughs that we need to stop the climate crisis. Support the show and help us talk to more people and talk at more of you listeners. We just started a donation drive because it takes money to make a show. We're trying to get 50 patrons this time around. And if we do, we're going to put on a live show here in Taipei, Taiwan. And if you're not here, you can watch it live. But only if we get 50 of you to join us and become patrons today. So join Waste Not, Why Not and donate at patreon.com/Waste Not, Why Not. It's Waste Not, Why Not, one word. Not Waste Not, Why Not, one word. Just Waste Not, Why Not. No spaces, just all together. The name of the show, Waste Not, Why Not. Patreon.com/Waste Not, Why Not. You get it.
Okay, we're back. We've taken a break. We've breathed in some air.
That wasn't much of a break. I thought we were going to go walk around and like get a little breath of air or something.
We did, Piers. Don't you remember?
Oops.
It's the CO2 that's built up.
I'm assuming you're going to cut this all out.
Yeah. Unless it's really funny, then we'll keep it. We're back here with Piers. So now you're the Director of Health Strategies at View. How do the health benefits of the View Smart Glass compare to just regular blinds? Couldn't you just kind of really efficiently manage blinds to get the same sort of effect?
What we find is that in practice never happens, that when blinds are down, they stay down, and when they're up, they stay up. In fact, only 6% of blinds are adjusted daily, and less than half are adjusted even once during a whole year. So 50% of blinds stay stationary for the whole year. There are systems of blinds that will be kind of more automatic, but they still block the view. So when our glass tints down, you can still have the view outside that has those biophilic benefits. Whereas if you pull a blind, you lose out in the view. You might control glare, but you're still making a dark, kind of gloomy environment.
Right. So you never feel like you're just trapped in some kind of box.
Right.
You know there's a world outside.
Right. It's always the right amount of daylight. However much daylight that needs to be, it's always the right amount. That's what our technology does.
And in real simple terms, how does this work? How does this impact our health?
There are a couple different mechanisms. One is that we just have an innate preference for daylight and
because
views.
We evolved to be outside.
We've evolved it's actually called the savanna hypothesis, which is that we evolved in the savanna. So we actually have a preference. So that's a biological kind of mandate that comes in. And it's actually the term biophilia is coined by E.O. Wilson, who's a professor at Harvard. If you talk to architects, they're always thinking of ways that they can build nature into the design, whether it's by actually physically having views and plants or by bringing in things that kind of mimic nature. So that's one side of the spectrum. The second part is that we also evolved with a day-night cycle. And not just us, every single organism has evolved with a day-night cycle. There's always been day and night, right?
So far.
Well, there was one time there wasn't, which is when all the dinosaurs went extinct.
Right. Okay. So we want to keep this day-night cycle going.
Yeah.
Okay.
And since every organism has evolved that way, almost every single organism has a biological clock called circadian system. So if you're a plant, it tells you when you want to blossom, which way to face to get the sun. If you're an organism, or a mammal, for example, that's the cue that tells you when it's the best time to hunt or to sleep or to do any of these kind of basic biological functions. And so there have actually been studies where they've looked at bacteria and they've taken away the circadian clock that's keeping their rhythm in line with the sun. And the ones that don't have that gene end up out-competed by the ones that do. So it's not just a nice to have that we like to sleep at night and be awake during the day. If you take away this kind of genetic component from who we are as humans, it can drive all these crazy effects.
So is that why whenever I fly back from Taiwan to the US, my jet lag makes me feel like I'm failing genetically?
Exactly. So it's, and you've all had that experience if you've been jet lagged. It's not just your sleep that's off, it's metabolism and your diet, and kind of it really throws off a lot of your systems. A lot of different hormones are regulated by this clock. So in the evening, typically your body releases melatonin, which tells you to sleep. And in the morning, it releases things like cortisol, which are more kind of stimulating hormones. Those hormones are triggered by exposures to daylight. So in the morning, when you get that bright daylight, that's what cues those hormones to release. Similarly, when it gets later in the evening and the sun goes down and you get more of an orangey hue, that color is what stimulates you to release melatonin to make you sleepy.
So if you're in an office and you just have these really bright lights on you all the time, you're not getting any natural light, are you just kind of always stressed out all the time because your body thinks it's like, prime time and you have to get going? Is that what's happening?
There's part of that, or it could be the flip where you're not getting daylight during the day and you're feeling really drowsy. The other flip side of it is screen use and people that use their phones or watch TV late till night. That suppresses the release of melatonin and makes it harder to fall asleep. So it's on both ends. Really what you need is a good cycle, a day-night cycle that has bright daylight in the morning and during the day, and then in the evening having that dusk experience.
So my insomnia is related to living in a cloudy environment where I look at my screen too much. Okay, all right. Check one to move back to California. All right.
Yes. So there has been a lot of research looking at sleep quality in response to not even daylight, but just changing the type of electric lighting even, and the color of that light to be more similar to sunlight, which is kind of a bright blue light, versus an orangey light, which you think of like those fluorescent light bulbs that are like that, can make you really drowsy.
And what have you found kind of specifically in your research with the View Smart Glass? What have you found the benefits? Like if you have View Smart Glass, do you get 20 minutes of better quality sleep? Or have you found any fun facts like that?
So the way that where View comes in is, since we aren't a blind, we're open when the sunlight is there. We always have the exposure to daylight for our occupants. They get that bright blue exposure in the morning, and that helps them re-entrain that circadian rhythm. So when they get home at night, they're ready to go to sleep.
Okay, so this is kind of like an IoT cloud kind of connected glass. This isn't just, there's like an electrical current, there's cables or something going on here.
So every single pane is its own IP address. They're all controllable independently. So a lot of times they just run on what we call our intelligent, but we can even give control back to the occupants and have them on their phone with their app. They can change the tint themselves to their own preference.
Have you found occupants able to kind of do the glass better than the program can? Or is the program really just so comprehensive that it knows better than we do what we like for light?
The program knows better. We have a lot of people where we give them control to override it. And for the first week, they'll play around, they'll change the tint and just see what happens. And then after that, they just forget about it and they just let it run because it works the way it's supposed to work.
Okay.
The second thing I didn't mention from before is that we also have a sensor we install on the roof to look at cloud cover. So even if there's a situation where we think the sun would be, but it's cloudy, it'll know to remain open and not to tint dark.
Okay. So this clearly has health benefits, mental health benefits. What about environmental benefits? What about energy benefits? Is this like an energy saving feature because you're reducing glare, you're reducing heat, you're keeping the building cooler? How does that compare to the health benefits?
Yeah, it has a really strong sustainability performance. We save 8 to 20% of energy, which is,
that's pretty big.
It's
that's
very
considerable.
Sizable.
Yeah.
And buildings, consume 40% of primary energy. So this is a very sizable dent we can make in terms of how these buildings are consuming energy. The challenge we have from more of a storytelling perspective is that those energy costs are relatively minimal compared to the cost of employees. For every dollar they spend on energy, they spend $10 on the rent and $100 on the employees. So even if we show a 1% difference in productivity, that will dwarf the 8% they saved on their energy cost. So we've been trying to work on that sustainability message and make that resonate. And there are customers we have that will go for it because of that. But really, it's come down a lot of times to making the financial and health case to win people over on the product.
So this is just sort of a happy relationship where something that's good for the environment in terms of energy usage is also really good for people being able to see nature. So it's kind of like a nice mixture crossover between the two.
Which is rare. If you look at my earlier work, I was often in a conundrum because I looked at where you had to choose between having a lot of ventilation, which is energy expensive in a healthier environment, or having one that performs energy well, but then reduces ventilation rates and makes the air quality worse. So that was a conundrum that was hard for me to grapple with. Here at View, it's a win-win. You get to have sustainability, you get to have improved financial performance, you also get to have better productivity and better health outcomes.
Is there any relationship with solar panels? Because I know with buildings, you have to do a lot of solar modeling before you're going to install panels. And it sounds like Vue's already doing that, because in order to have the glass work, you have to understand sort of the solar envelope. So is there a relationship with solar? Can you put solar panels in the windows?
We haven't done that yet, mainly because if we did, it would start to obstruct the view, which is kind of our core value proposition.
Whole point, right.
So I think solar panels are great for places where you don't have windows, because you don't want to just have that sunlight reflect. You would like to capture it. We, at least not yet, we don't have the technology that will convert that heat into energy.
Sure. I mean, I think having a good view is probably, better than, whatever marginal solars you would get from that.
Plus, if you look at the way that we save energy, it's by having the sun come in when we want it to and blocking it when we don't. That's effectively a way of doing exactly that, as opposed to capturing that energy ourselves and then putting it back on the grid. We're actually just capturing it directly through the glass to heat the building.
Okay. And just putting on my skeptical, recycling, trash, environmental hat, what's going into these smart windows? Is this some kind of like heavy metal compound? What's the smart element of the window made out of?
So, over 99% of the product is just glass, which is, silicon.
That's safe.
Silica. So that
go to the beach and that's fine.
Right. So that part is perfectly fine. And then there's the really small layer we're applying on the inside, which is, it's a lithium ion layer. So again, it's just an elemental property. So the chemicals we're using, it's all very kind of simplistic. Other thing is that we're installing something that has to last the lifetime of a building. So this is a 30-year cycle. That's the kind of the guarantee we're providing.
Oh, okay. So you're not popping out the windows or changing the material. Once the window's in, the window is in.
Otherwise, people will not buy us.
Okay.
If you buy a window that's going to fail after 10 years, no one's going to want that. So that's the other thing too, is that we've done some of the environmental product testing to look at what our life cycle is, and we perform really well, especially when you start to bring in the energy benefits. So the energy benefits we bring to the building far outweigh whatever it takes to manufacture it up front.
Oh, okay. So it kind of environmentally pays for itself, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's encouraging to hear. And then I guess, so it sounds like it's good for the environment. It's good for our health. It's, good for, just pure energy. So where are you going to be putting these smart windows? Can I have them in my home? Is this like something that goes in a car? Is this a giant building? Is this an airplane? Is this like a glass cube where an artist does a dance? Where would we find these smart windows?
We traditionally focus on kind of the big end of real estate. So we're looking at large offices, large hospitals, airports, kind of any larger commercial real estate project. The reason for that is that whether it's the developer or a corporate owner goes down the path to make a building, it's a really big investment. And although from our perspective, it might seem like our glass is expensive, it's only a 1% increase for them on the total cost of the project. So if you compare us just to regular glass, yes, we're more expensive, but benefit in terms of the energy, financial, and health, those far outweigh the cost that goes in up front.
Interesting. So for large projects, it's going to make sense over time because they're already so big, they can absorb that cost. But for someone who's just doing maybe a few windows in their house, it doesn't sound like it's going to be economic for them. It doesn't also sound like it's going to be economic for Vue itself, right?
Right. Plus with each building, we put a lot of effort into all the controls and systems. Like I mentioned, we do this full 3D model of the building. That's a labor intensive process. So doing that on a really small unit scale is hard. But doing it for these larger projects, then it's worth the effort.
Okay, so for those of you that were trying to buy smart glass right now while you were listening from Vue, maybe hold off or maybe talk to the next new building you make. Okay, so we've talked a lot about smart glass. We talked about how it works, what it is. We understand the present day very well. Looking into the future, putting on our science fiction hat, what can we expect coming down the pipeline? What is the future? Is this like Minority Report? Is this like, I don't want to say Black Mirror. Is this like Clear Window? And what can we expect, in the next 5, 10, 20 years with this kind of technology?
Yeah, we're very excited about the innovation path that we have. We're the first wire in the building. We have the ability to layer on all sorts of cool technologies on top. So much of our health that we've thought about up to this point has been around these, thinking about our genetics or about our behaviors. And one of the things that really excites me about Vue is kind of taking these uncontrollables out of it and just having it be a matter of just showing up. Like I can imagine a world where the places you spend all of your time is what's driving your health. There's this quote from Churchill, I think, I'm probably gonna butcher it, but he said, "We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us." And that's, I think, a vision that I'd like to see come true where, we make these spaces where we spend all of our time. Is there a way to make them so that they actually are what make us healthier and more prosperous?
It's funny how I think you can get started doing something and you're in your work and you're in your element. And I think this happens a lot with environmental and maybe even social issues too, is it's hard to kind of articulate and imagine that world of the future and then tell it to people, right? Because most people are not, thinking about the future because they have other issues. They have really painful realities that they're dealing with. So I feel like when we're in like an academic or in a podcasting environment, you can think about the future and try and tell people that there is something to look forward to and that we're experiencing all this rapid technology, but it doesn't have to be frightening. It can be exhilarating because we had all these buildings that were just thoughtless pollution boxes basically. And now we can have buildings that, can make you happier. And that's inspiring to me.
Yeah. If you ask most people here at View that question, that they would talk exactly about that. They talk about all these like technical marvels that we can do that will just blow your mind. And that's like less of a motivator for me. I don't want to just make like really cool technology. Yes, we're a tech company. My core values are around sustainability and health, and it always has been. And so while it might not be as kind of exciting and futuristic to think about the technologies that help get us there, but those are what ultimately drive me. And thinking about what can we do as a company that's going to help us solve climate change and help us make people just generally healthier without them dealing with, their genetic or behavioral factors that they might not be able to change too much.
I mean, that's important. People are deciding every day to enter into climate change, to enter into public health. And this is not something that you just forget about. You don't learn, hey, your building in your bed is poisoning you. And then you don't go, I'm just going to never remember that again. It's something that you think about and then you want to try and do something. And I think that, your career is one example of someone who went from academia and figured out, okay, maybe there's a way I can make this happen in kind of the private space, which is also public spaces at the same time. Right. And I think that there's a lesson there for people. It's not just always directly what you're interested in. Sometimes you can look at things a little differently and come to a different conclusion. Mm-hmm. All right, today, Piers, we talked about a lot of different things. I learned a lot, probably because we're in a nice, clean building and I wasn't getting my mental health impacted by the air quality or the light quality. We had nice flowers outside. We talked about View. We talked about smart glass, how it's made, where it goes. And we talked about what a career in public health looks like and kind of that transition from academia into the private sector. So thank you so much for taking the time, for taking us on a little tour and for talking with us. We really appreciate it and hope to have you on again in the future to talk health.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming by, and I hope you guys enjoyed the tour.
Thanks, Piers, and talk to you again soon.
Okay. Yeah.
And then thank you, for real. Not just a recorded thank you. I'm Nature Nate, and this has been the Waste Not Why Not podcast, recorded at Future Ward, a co-working space in Taipei, Taiwan. Do you have a question for us? Tweet them at us. We are Waste Not Pod on Twitter, and our DMs are open. Subscribe to our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever. Give us a good rating to let us know you really care. This has been a Ghost Island Media production. This episode was produced by Emily Y. Wu and myself, Nature Nate, edited by Yu-Chen Lai. Special shout out to PicCollage for letting us crash on their couch. That was very coolage of you. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye. Hey, Patreon, remember that? There was an ad about it. Go to Patreon. Just go. I've said it so many times. Just go.
Not even going to include any links or anything.
Just go. You've heard it before. And if you haven't, I'm sorry. But go.